been compliant with the rules. They didn't have proper buoys, they didn't have identification markers on them, they weren't safely set. So, you know, we might think that these things are at high level, but actually where we've got the capacity to address it, we really should be.
Well, Member Blair next, and then Councillor Walker, and I think that's it.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation. Luckily enough to have 6 encounters with the Maui dolphins, just spending so much time in the water on the west coast, around those places which you mentioned. I see we've got these postcards, but what else can we do to save the Māori dolphins as IMSB members and councillors to generate more support in our constituencies?
Thanks for the question, and lucky you for having that opportunity. They're just such amazing, engaging little animals, aren't they? And we regularly get reports, and there's a DOC database that actually, 0800 DOC HOT, if you ring them up and tell them where you see them, there are so many catalogued incidents where the dolphins have swum around surfers or swimmers and looked them in the eye, and it's a really special honour. So you're honoured. So there's a lot that we can do, and actually the solutions are quite simple. If we get those trawlers out of that dolphin habitat, then we know, based on science, that the population trajectory will increase, and they'll be out. I mean, even though the numbers are so small, they can recover. So this is our best shot through the threat management plan. They are only reviewed once every 5 years, and it always seems that they're sort of incremental changes rather than going to the extent that the IWC recommends, the IUCN recommends, the International Institute of Marine Mammalogy recommends. That's 100-metre depth contour protection. And there's clear evidence that actually the economy and society will benefit if we save those dolphins, if we protect that area, and yet the cost to fishing aren't significant. We've done economic analysis, other organisations have looked at this. New Zealanders are willing to pay more for their fish and more in their taxes, according to surveys, to protect these dolphins. And ultimately it's a political decision, and with that threat management plan, in the submission process, and then with the political decision making in Cabinet subsequently, that's our best shot in a long time to really make a difference. So use all your power to get that protection out to 100 metres deep and save those little dolphins.
That's great clarification, thank you. I've got Councillor Walker, Councillor Clow, and I think we'll move on after that. Councillor Walker.
Sure. So just got a bolt-on question to Renata's and John's, and that's around what more can we do. Quite obviously, one of the things that our council could do is to make a submission to the government around set netting. And just on that, I mean, one of the issues around set netting is as much and all as we've got a bylaw that goes to nuisance and the like around people, arguably dolphins aren't that far off. So maybe that's something that the government could act on, and our council could act on in terms of widening the spectrum beyond the human species. So I just toss that in. I don't know what the possibilities are around that, but I know that that appears to be happening with other species such as apes and so on.
Yeah, there are good grounds for banning set nets within the coastal environment. The photo that I showed on that issue was actually a seal caught in a fishing net just south of Piha. So we know that seabirds, penguins, sea lions, seals, dolphins, whales, they're all bycatch collateral damage from set net entrapment. And it's certainly within the realm of the government's scope to ban set nets. Other countries in the world have, and actually most countries have. And there are much less indiscriminate methods of catching fish than just putting a net in the water that may or may not be retrieved. So, yeah, we would encourage that approach.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And final question, Councillor Clow.
Hello, Christine. You mentioned the wild animals should be in the wild, and I think most of us would agree on that, but what about the role that zoos play or DOC plays with intervention programs? You know, it could be Takahi or Kiwi, where we're actually, and obviously in some of the big animals around the world where we have to intervene to try and save them. What's World Animal Protection New Zealand's view on that? And I've got a second question.
Well, where there's a genuine conservation purpose, we support that, but you don't need a zoo to achieve that. And actually the funding that goes towards zoos could just go directly into conservation when you think about all the ancillary expenses. So we definitely support conservation efforts, and that might require the animals to be in containment for a limited amount of time while they recover or while they're breeding. But often conservation is used to justify captivity, and you know, sometimes there's never any intention to release those animals back into the wild. So you know, animals are wildlife, not entertainers, and that's our line.
Okay. And what's your organisation's view on 1080? Because it's not 1080 doesn't have a good outcome for some animals, but arguably it has a good outcome for others. So what's your view on 1080?
We get a lot of contact about 1080. There are a lot of concerns out there, as you all know, about the animal welfare impacts of 1080, and we have to steer a very careful line. Animal welfare is our key concern, so we're concerned about anything that causes harm and suffering to animals, which for some of our supporters isn't a hard enough line, and for others of our supporters is too hard a line. And you know, given my background, I know that predator control is a really important issue, but I certainly know that it's a really touchy subject with our supporters, and there's a lot of interest in it. So we would like to see a move away from indiscriminate and inhumane predator control and this culture that supports, you know, stomping a possum or, you know, the sort of flagrant killing of animals as if that's sport. And whether it's 1080 or hunting, animal welfare has got to be a consideration. So we support efforts to make sure that any attempts to restore a natural balance is done with the welfare of the animal and humane practices in mind.
Councillor Casey's just asked me to remind you all, I don't think it's a conflict, I think it's just an issue of something we're very proud of. Councillor Casey's actually our SPCA ambassador on Auckland Council, and a very good job she does too. So thank you, Councillor Casey. Would you like to move the vote of thanks to our two presenters? Moved by Councillor Casey, seconded Councillor Clow. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you so much, Christine. And Elaine, I hope your voice comes back soon. Thank you. Thanks so much, and thanks for all the work you do.
Thanks for your hearing and support. Thank you.
So just before we go on to our next presenter, also just to let people know, we had 3 requests which were received for public forum, which were received after the agenda closed, but we've accepted because we are getting as much information and feedback on our smoke-free plan as we can. So we've got the Otara Gambling and Alcohol Action Group, that's Dr. Grant Hewitson, Papai Te Haora, Māori Public Health, Mihi Blair, and Pacific Health and Welfare, Metua Bates, who's the chair. So just to let you know, that's part of our group of presenters that you may not have